Thanks for tuning in at Brackeys.
Hello everyone and welcome to video number 25 in the How to Make a 2D Platformer course. In today's video we're going to be making an audio manager for our game. That means we're going to be creating this central script that is going to store a list of all of the different audio files that we want to play during our game. And then we're going to have a very easy to use function called play sound, where we simply insert a string storing the name of the file, and it's then going to play it for us with some different sound variants. So we're going to have a pitch randomness and a volume randomness and that kind of stuff. It's going to make it very easy for us to add new sounds to our game. So that's awesome. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So you can see here that I'm in the project as I left it the last time, and well, basically nothing's changed here. I simply moved the script we created in the last video under the scripts folder, and we should be pretty much ready to create a new one. So under the add component, simply type audio manager and then new script and make it of type C#. So let's hit create an add. And let's double click this to open it up in Visual Studio on Mono Developer, whatever you are using. So this script is actually going to be fairly simple in nature, but it's going to be very, very effective for the stuff that we want to do. So first off, I want to get rid of the using system.collections namespace. We're not going to be needing that whatsoever. And we want this to derive from mono behavior. But before we actually go and model out what we want in our audio manager class, I want to create a different class. I want to create a custom class up here, and this is going to be a public class. And this class is going to be called sound. So I want to kind of model out the idea of a sound object. So if we're going to have a sound that we can play in our game, well, it's going to be needing some different properties. One of these is a string, which is going to store the name of our sound, so we can very easily refer to the sound or tell it to play simply using a name as identification. Then next up, we're going to have a public audio clip. We want to actually associate an audio file. So this is simply going to be the, let's just call this the clip. And finally, we want some kind of reference to an object in the game that can play this clip. So if we go into Unity here, you can see that so far when we've been playing our respawn countdown audio file here, we've been simply attaching an audio source to whatever object. This is a DM object, and we simply add in an audio clip from the project here into this slot, and the audio source will actually play this with some different settings. However, what we want to do is we want to create this audio manager where we drag in all of our different clips and do some settings in here. And then when we play the game in the start method, we're going to instantiate a bunch of objects which will lie under the GM object, and each one is going to have an audio source associated. We could also put all of this on one single object, but there's really no reason to. So we're going to have these different objects, and with each their audio source. And then when we want to play the clip, we simply have a reference to that audio source and tell it to play. So that's kind of the idea here. And therefore we want to be able to reference an audio source. And we want this reference to be, well, private, because we don't want to be able to change it. Instead, we're going to be creating a method to access this. So we're going to have a private audio source. You can just leave out the private here if you want to. And we are simply going to call this source. Then we're going to have a public method that's going to be a void called set source. And in here, we're going to feed it an audio source reference underscore source. And the method is simply going to say that source equals underscore source. And I believe that's all we're going to do. Yeah, cool. So now that we have that in there, we can also go ahead and create this idea of playing a clip. So let's say that we have a public void called play. And well, basically, what do we want to do whenever we play this clip? Oh yeah, in here we can also add to our source the clip. So we can say source.clip equals clip. There we go. Because we don't need to do this each time we hit play, because we know that the audio clip is not going to change throughout the game. So when this method here is called, the clip is going to be called or set with it. Okay, so my phone went off there for a second, but we'll just continue. Good. So we simply insert the clip there. Then in our play method, we could very simply go ahead and say source.play, and it would play the clip associated, which is the clip that we've inserted up here. However, I think that there are some more awesome stuff that we can do with this. We can add some randomness to how the sound plays. And I definitely think that that's something that we should do. So let's think about this for a moment. We have these variables up here. Well, we could start by adding a public float, which is going to store the volume, a public float, which is going to store the pitch. So now we have those two settings, but those are kind of static, and we could just set those directly down here, which we're going to start out by doing. So we're going to say that source.volume should equal. Actually, let's give these up here some default values, and let's just add that back in there. So let's just set that to a default value of 0.7 and this to a default value of 1. And you can see that we can simply add these in here. So that's going to be equal to volume. And we could do source.pitch and set that equal to pitch. And that's going to be just fine. Maybe we should see if this is showing up in the inspector. And actually, let's go ahead and test that now. So we can go in here and we can define a sound array. And this is simply going to be a list or an array of sounds. So that's going to store all of our sounds. And we want this to be editable in the inspector, but not accessible through script. So we'll make this a serialized field. However, this is not going to work. You can see if I save this now and head into Unity and wait for it to recompile here, you can see that the audio manager still has no fields showing up. You can't actually see this array. And the reason why is because this class is not marked as a serializable class. So again, we need to go up here and add system.serializable, and now this should work. So if we save that and head back in here, you can see it showing up. And then we can add however many elements that we want to add. But I'm just going to begin with 1. We can add a name to it, and this is going to be the respawn. And we can drag in an audio clip. And you can see that we have this volume and pitch values right here. However, this kind of sucks. Instead of changing this value here, which is kind of an arbitrary value, well, we don't want our volume to ever go above 1 or below 0. We could add some kind of restriction to this. And we do that using a slider. And to add a slider, we simply use an attribute here called range. And in this, we give it a minimum value of 0 and a maximum of 1. So that's simply going to clamp this volume between 0 and 1 in the inspector. And we can do the same with the pitch here. That's going to be clamped between 0.5 and 1.5, let's say. You can put in whatever values you want here. So now when we save that and head back in here, it's just going to feel a lot nicer. So now we can set our volume here to 0.7 and a pitch here to 1. And you can see that we can simply adjust these however we want to. So that's very easy and looks much nicer. Next up, the randomness. So we can actually go ahead and create 2 more fields. We can make a public float, which is going to be the volume randomness, volume variance, random volume, whatever you want to do. I'm just going to do random volume here. This is going to be a multiplier. So I'm going to default that to 0.1. So that means that if our volume was, let's say if our pitch had a random pitch of 0.1, the pitch could vary between 0.9 and 1.1 because it's simply a multiplication. However, with the 0.7 here, it would be 0.1. It would be 0.7 times 1 plus the random volume, but I'm going to show you that in a second. So public float random pitch, and again default that to 0.1. And it's very good to have these random values in the game to make it sound not repetitive. So we're going to give this a range also, and it's going to go between 0 and 0.5 maybe. I think that's actually the volume. No, that's going to be fine, and we're going to do the same with the pitch here. And then down here, we want to set it equal to volume multiplied with 1 plus random.range, and remember to put a parentheses here, random.range, and this is going to go between negative random volume divided by 2 to positive random volume divided by 2. So this is what it's going to look like, and we're going to do the exact same thing with the pitch, only now we change this to pitch and random pitch here and there. So that's going to give our sound some variance, and of course you can see why this works, because we multiplied with 1. If we have no randomness whatsoever, then this is going to go from 0 to 0, and the random number between 0 and 0 is, well, 0, and therefore this is just going to return 1. And when multiplied by 1, this is simply going to be the volume. If we go between 0.1, or if we have a randomness of 0.1, this is going to go from negative 0.05 to positive 0.05, which is going to be a range of 0.1. And then we add that onto the 1, so this could either be 0.95 or 1.05, and then we multiply that with the volume. So you can see how that works. Good. So let's delete this now, and I think this is pretty much all we need to do inside of our sound class. Next up is just adding some methods to actually make this work within Unity very easily. So we can just go in here and check that all of these settings are working. So just wait for Unity to reload here, and you can see that they both defaulted to 0.1 and how we can drag these around as we want. For example, the respawn countdown here is not something that I want any variance on, since it is basically just my voice, and that doesn't get too repetitive if it's only played like every time you fall down. It's not a very repetitive sound like a machine gun or a dying effect or anything like that. So we're going to be just fine with that. Cool. Yeah. So inside of our audio manager class, we are ready to add some different functions. First off, let's make in the start function, we can basically loop through all of our different sounds and add an object for each one of them. So make a for statement, a for statement, and this is going to be I, and it's going to be sounds.length. So for every sound in the sound array, we are going to add a new game object, and we're going to store reference to this. So it's going to be game object underscore go equals new game object. And we're going to give it a name. And the name that we want to give this is, well, let's prefix it by sound underscore, and then the number of the sound. So let's just do the index here, plus another underscore, plus, and then the name of the sound. So let's do sounds to I.name. That's how it's going to be. Cool. And for now, it's of course only going to spawn one object, but when we add more, this is going to be to make it very easy to find the correct sounds and see the settings and if they've been applied correctly and all of that. And next up, we're going to actually add a component to this, which is going to be the audio source component, because this is going to spawn without anything added to it, only a transform component. So we simply go underscore go dot add component of type and then audio source. There we go. And then we can call on the sound. So sounds incremented by I dot set source. And we want to set the source to the newly added audio source. This is just the same as referencing it up here. So if we do audio source here and call this underscore source equals that is the and then putting in the source here, that's the exact same as simply doing this, except this is not going to store anything in the variable, and so it's not going to be cleaned up with the garbage collector because it's never really added. So this is going to be a tiny bit faster. Cool. So now that we have that in place, let me just think what we need to do. We are setting the source and all of that is perfect. Then we can go ahead and create a method for playing a sound. So I'm going to make a public void here called play sound, and this is the audio manager, so later we can do some special things for music if that's something that we want to do, but we'll see. And this is going to take in a string, which is going to be the name of the sound, and it's simply going to loop through all of the sounds. So I'm creating the same loop as we had up here. And there are more effective way of finding a specific sound, all of that I know, but this is going to be just fine, and it's very easy syntax. I mean, you understand why this is working, so don't worry. Unless you're going to be having hundreds of thousands of sounds, this is going to be fine. And then we check if sounds, make an if statement here, if sounds to I dot name is equal to underscore name, then we found the correct sound, and we're just going to play the first sound that comes up with that name. If there are multiple, the other ones are going to be skipped. We could just loop through all of them and let it play all of them. That would be just fine, but I think it's all right if we only play one. So we are going to now play that sound by doing sounds to I dot play. There we go. So once we found it, we call play on the sound, and then we want to return. So there we go. We exit out of the loop and everything's fine. And if we reach this place down here, well, then it's because it has not found any sound with that name. So no sound with name. And then we are ready to throw some kind of debug.log statement. It's not going to crash or anything, but we definitely want to let ourselves know, because then we are calling something that doesn't need to be called. So we're just going to throw a warning here saying that audio manager sound not found in sounds array or in list, and then we specify the name of the sound here, so not found in list plus, and then we do underscore name. All right, so I'm just going to do a comment there instead. Looks cleaner. Cool. And that's basically all we need. There's only one thing with this, and that is we need a reference to this audio manager. And instead of getting that by dragging in as a component or whatever, we're going to be using a kind of TD singleton as we've done before. So again, let's create a static reference and then set that through the awake method. So here we're going to create a public static audio manager. And this is going to be the instance, and in the void start or void awake, we simply want to set instance equal to this, and we can just check if there are multiple things and then throw an error. So if instance is not equal to null, debug.log error more than one audio manager in the scene. There we go. And this is just going to be an else. Cool. And I believe that was all We reference that, we go down here. And just for quick testing, we can call the audio.play method through here. So let's just go and do that. So we'll just play a sound here. So we'll say play sound, and the sound we want to try playing is the respawn sound. Just to see if this is working, and let me just turn on my audio here so I can listen in on whether or not this is working. Let's try.
Respawning. 3, 2, 1.
So that's actually working, and you can see under the geom object that so the sound is right here, and we probably want to parent it to the geom object. I forgot that part, but you can see that the volume is randomized, the pitch is randomized within the boundary we've set, and yeah, that's all really perfect, and you can see its name correctly and all that. So just to make this a bit cleaner, we're simply going to go into this game object and say go.transform.setParent, and we want to set it to this.transform. There we go, and that's just going to look a lot better. So if we hit play now, it's going to play the sound.
Respawning.
And you can see that it now appears under the geom object. We can of course create a sub-object for this. You can do whatever you want with this in order to organize it, but this is going to be the very basics. So let's just try and implement this. Let's remove this play sound call right there. Let's instead open up our game master, and we can now delete this audio source right here. It's not needed. Let's create a reference to our audio manager from within this game master. So let's create down here. Let's create it down here. A private audio manager. So we'll just do all of the caching here. Cache. Private audio manager, and let's just call this the audio manager. And in the start method, we'll set, we do all of this, and then we cache. We'll simply set audio manager. Whoops. Audio manager equal to audio manager dot instance. Cool. And we can of course check if this is null. We should probably do that. So if audio manager is equal to null, then we throw a debug.log error saying that freak out the no audio manager found in the scene. There we go. And then under the respawn player, where we find our audio source and play the sound, instead what we want to do is we want to say audio manager dot play sound, and then we give it the name here, so respawn. And instead of hard coding this, we could add it as a variable up here, which I think we are going to do. So we already have all of this spawning stuff. So let's do a public string, and this is of course going to be the spawn sound name, and we're simply going to feed this down here. Okay, save that. Remember, when we go back into Unity to change this variable, there we go, to respawn. Now hit apply, collapse that, clear that, collapse that, and that, and that. Okay, we want to watch that. And now hit play, and hopefully it's not going to play right away, but it's added here now. You can see that the volume and pitch is defaulted to 1, but this should change as soon as we actually respawn. So when I jump down now,
respawning,
it changes
3, 2,
and the
1.
sound actually plays. So you can see here that the volume just bumped down to 0.67. That might be correct, but I actually only wanted it. Okay, so it starts at 0.7, so that's why, and that's just fine. So you can see that this is now working just as intended. We have the variance, and I want to disable this for that. There we go. hit apply to that, and you can go ahead and add all of the different sounds that you want by simply following this very simple pattern of getting a reference to the audio manager and then calling the play sound. You don't even need to cache it if it's not something you want to do. You can just call it directly. It's not going to hurt your performance too much. So that was basically all I wanted to show you in this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.